Skill 5, Midpoint and Distance. Example 1, we're going to be finding the midpoint. For part A, we have segment AB with endpoints at -4 and 9. So this is on a number line. We want to find the coordinate of the midpoint. So in this one, we're going to find M by taking -4 plus 9 and dividing it by 2 to find the middle. So that's going to give me a +5 over 2. If you leave it like that, that is fine, or you could write it as 2.5. That would be the midpoint. For the next one, we have segment EF has endpoints at E, which is 7, 5, and F, which is 2, -4. What are the coordinates of the midpoint M of segment EF? So this one is on a coordinate system, which means we have to do the other form, which means we're going to add the x's together. So I'm going to take 7 plus 2 and divide that by 2. And I'm going to take 5 plus a -4. And I'm going to divide that by 2. So the midpoint is going to be 7 plus 2 is 9 over 2. And 5 minus 4 is 1 over 2. So you could leave it like that, or you could write it as 4.5, comma, 0.5. Either one of those would be correct for the midpoint. Example 2, finding an endpoint. The midpoint of segment CD is M, which is -2, 1. One endpoint is C, which is -5, 7. What are the coordinates of the other endpoint? So for this one, we have to remember that the midpoint is equal to your x's added together of your endpoints, x1 plus x2, and then you divide by 2, and then y1 plus y2, and divide that by 2. So I'm going to plug in what I know. First of all, I know my midpoint. My midpoint is actually -2, 1. So now I just need to plug in what else I know. So my first x is -5. I do not know my second x. My first y is 7. I do not know my second y. So I'm going to just match things up. So this -2 is going to be equal to that first coordinate. The 1 is going to be equal to the second coordinate. So that looks like -2 equals -5 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. And then I'm going to solve that. The other one is going to be 1 equals 7 plus y sub 2 over 2. Now I'm just going to solve. So multiply by 2, I get -4 equals -5 plus x sub 2. Add the 5 over and I get 1 equals x sub 2. Next part, I'm going to multiply by 2 and give me 2 equals 7 plus y sub 2. Then I'm going to subtract the 7 over and get a -5 equals y sub 2. So my final answer should be a point, because that's what we're talking about here, coordinates. So it's going to be 1, comma, -5. And that is your endpoint D. For example 2, same thing. We're going to use that same midpoint formula to solve it. Midpoint of segment AB is M, which is 4, -9, and the endpoint of A is -3, -5. What are the coordinates of B? So I'm going to plug that in. Midpoint is 4, -9. So that's going to equal my first x, which is -3 plus x sub 2. And divide that by 2. And then my first y is -5 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. So then I'm just going to match them up. Be careful when you match them up. The first one goes with the first coordinate, and they're equal to each other. Second one goes with the second coordinate, they're equal to each other. Giving me 4 equals negative 3 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. And also we have negative 9 equals negative 5 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. So now I'm going to solve this one by multiplying by 2, giving me 8 equals negative 3 plus x sub 2. And then I add the 3 over, giving me 11 equals x sub 2. And the other one, multiply by 2, giving me a negative 18 equals negative 5 plus y sub 2. Add the 5 over is going to give me a negative 13 equals y sub 2. So your final answer is going to be your endpoint B is going to equal 11 comma negative 13. And that is your final answer. Example 3, finding distance. In both of these, we're going to have to use our distance formula. So remember that is d equals the square root of x1 minus x2 squared plus y1 minus y2 squared. Okay, so that's our distance formula. We're going to use this on both examples. For this first one, it says what is the distance between u, which is negative 7, 5, and v, which is 4, negative 3. So my distance is going to equal the square root of negative 7 minus 4 squared plus 5 minus negative 3 squared. And then I'm just going to solve one step at a time. Square root of negative 11 squared plus 5 minus negative 3 is 8 squared. So we have the square root of 121 plus 64, which is the square root of 185. Now go ahead and type that in the calculator, get a decimal answer. It would be approximately 13.6. And for the last example, we have segment SR has endpoints S, negative 214, and R, 3, negative 1. What is SR to the nearest tenth? Okay, so we have D equals the square root of my x terms, negative 2 minus 3 squared, plus my y terms, 14 minus negative 1 squared. Make sure you're very careful how you put in your pluses and minuses. So we have the square root, negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5 squared, plus 14 minus negative 1, 15 squared. So square root of 25 plus 225. And you're adding those together, so D equals the square root of 250, and we want our answer to the nearest tenth. So D is approximately equal to 15.8. And that's your final answer. So those are your notes over Skill 5, midpoint and distance. Summarize your notes. Make sure you understand these two different formulas and how to solve them. Then go through some practice problems. Make sure you can do them all. And then you should be ready for your quiz over this material.